The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Sakash here with my co-host, Tulio Saragusa, and we have a special guest who we'll introduce in a moment. So before we begin today's conversation, we want to take a second to recognize something very special for all of us here at the podcast. Today marks our 200th guest episode. So what started as a vision to create deeper conversations around business leadership, purpose, systems, empathy, and human connection has grown into an incredible community of founders, executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who all come on here and we share their experiences and challenges and wisdom with authenticity and much generosity. And so to every guest who has trusted us with their stories and insights, thank you. Your voice has helped bring bliss to life and through these real conversations that continue inspiring leaders and organizations around the world. So also to our audience, thank you for continuing to engage with us, share your feedback, and always ask those great questions and be a part of this growing community. Your support and your conversations and connection are the reason this show continues to grow and evolve. So we are incredibly grateful to every person who has joined us on this journey, and we're excited for what is still ahead. So today's episode should be a powerful conversation about leadership growth and the hidden challenges many founders face as their businesses scale. So according to the International Franchise Association, the IFA, franchising continues to be one of the most powerful models for business expansion and entrepreneurship. And behind that growth are founders and leadership teams, often navigating increasingly complex businesses and pressure and organizational strain and all that. And today we are exploring why franchising can break founders and what causes leadership friction during growth and how businesses can build the systems and leadership maturity necessary to scale sustainably. Tulio, introduce our special guest today.
My pleasure. Our guest today is John Francis, a franchise expert and founding father of Father's Eve. I'm unmuted. Good. Known throughout the industry as Johnny Franchise, John has spent more than 30 years working across every side of franchising as a franchisor, franchisee, multi-unit owner, developer, advisor, and board member. Through his work with more than 100 brands, he has developed deep expertise helping franchisors navigate the transition from emerging growth into scalable leadership infrastructure. John works with founders and leadership teams in the 30 to 300 unit range to help reduce organizational friction, strengthen leadership alignment, and build systems that support long-term growth. His work includes mastermind groups, advisory boards, executive coaching, and leadership development designed to help businesses scale without losing themselves in the process. Beyond franchising, John is also the founder of Father's Eve, a growing community focused on helping fathers connect through honest, judgment-free conversations rooted in clarity, connection, and authentic leadership. At the center of both his professional and personal work is the belief that stronger leaders and stronger fathers are built through real conversations, self-awareness, and human connection. John, welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast. We couldn't have had a better 200th guest than you. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm looking forward to the show and looking forward to sharing some insights. Thank you.
So, Johnny, after more than 3 decades working across nearly every role in franchising, you've said something that really stands out. The model is working, the founder is not. What patterns do you consistently see happening as founders try to scale beyond the emerging stage?
Well, in the franchise world, it's kind of a unique situation because whatever the business is that you started with, let's say it's a tire shop, I'm making it up. It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be whatever it is. That's the business you started with. And then once you decide to franchise that business, now you're in a franchise, which is another business. Obviously, it's a separate entity, franchising, but the business of franchising is not the same as the business you came from, the tire shop or the ice cream or the whatever product or service it might be. So franchising really has its own unique challenges. And I think a lot of people underestimate just how complicated and challenging franchising any business can be, because it takes a different set of skills, a different sense of awareness, and it's really all about people and relationships. And the product might be great, but if your relationships are lousy, you're going to struggle as a franchise. So franchising is much more than the product or service that's being franchised. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that, or don't even think about that until they realize it when they get into it and say, oh my God, what have I done? Franchising. And it's a much larger commitment, because you've got franchisees now investing their time and money and focus and attention into your business model through the franchising structure, which is a whole new level of commitment. They're not just employees, and they're not technically business partners, but you need to learn how to work together in those dimensions and more. It's a multi-dimensional environment, and it gets complicated. I like to say nothing's easy, but it certainly can be figured out. Franchising has been around for a long time. Lots of people are doing franchising, and it's a great way to grow your business. But I think there's certainly some things to learn and understand and how to do that better.
Now, John, there are a lot of founders. They've obviously built successful businesses, and by being very deeply involved in everything, usually early on, that's best. But eventually that same deep everything hands-on approach becomes a bit of a growth problem. It slows down growth. Why is that transition so difficult for leaders? And if you could also add some color, where is that transition best? When is it best for that to start to happen?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think, in the beginning of like any business, it takes an awful lot of hustle, hard work, the grind, if you will. You have to do a lot of things to be successful in any business, especially in the beginning. And in a franchise, that same thing is true. But as a business starts to grow and scale, and you start having these relationships, and you get more and more people involved, and things can just get more complicated, the founder often becomes a bottleneck unintentionally. They're certainly not trying to slow anything down, but because they're not built for scale, and maybe they don't understand the difference between growing a business and scaling a business, which is they're related, but they're different. And sometimes the founder can become a real their own obstacle without even realizing it. A lot of control, a lot of micromanagement, a lot of decision making that needs to evolve and change in order for a business to really to get to that next level. So when does that show up? It usually shows up pretty quick. When they realize the sacrifice that they're making at home, probably at working days and nights and weekends and holidays, and just their overall time commitment becomes painfully obvious. And then I would say the relationships, as I mentioned earlier, relationships come along, and the people that come along, whether they're on your corporate team or whether they're franchisees or sometimes the supplier companies that you work with, those relationships evolve and change over time. And then as your business performs or doesn't perform, that has an impact on things. The resources get constrained and focus gets challenging. And again, decision making, generally what used to work doesn't work anymore. And that's where founders get frustrated. Like, why is this not working? Why am I having no more fun? I thought this was going to be fun and easy. Well, nothing's fun and easy. It's all a lot more work and time than you ever expected. So it usually shows up pretty quick. Once a brand gets launched, they're franchising and they start, and and franchising is regulated. So there's some legal work, some accounting and audits and things you got to pay for, which is quite expensive. A lot of people don't understand the commitment it takes to franchise any business is a real commitment. And so once they're in it and they realize, oh my God, what have I done? Now they have to either sell the business and get out of the way, or change their approach and start growing with a better attitude or a different mindset to really turn into a franchise system.
So, John, if we could quickly sort of just go a little deeper and recap this for those who might be listening.
Sure.
Looking for the warning signs of when they are becoming the bottleneck. I think you mentioned something like when you're starting to think I'm not having fun anymore. Maybe that's one sign. What else?
Julia, I think like it's hard sometimes when you're a leader to be like, okay, you just think, oh, I've got to do this.
Right, they don't realize it.
Stuff. Yeah, it just starts piling up, and you think, it's your responsibility on a lot of this, and it's very hard to delegate or come up with systems, right?
So what are some of the if I from a self-awareness point of view, because Stephen's point, you may not even realize that you're way too deep and you're becoming the bottleneck. Now, it's one thing being way too deep and not becoming a bottleneck. Really what we're looking for is the warning sign that says you're actually the problem. So what are those? What should they be sort of looking for to say, oh, I might be actually causing my business to slow down because of my need to be in everything?
Yeah, I think it's probably the most obvious signals are frustration in your team. When your employees are expressing frustration with either decision making, timeliness, or decision making in full context. Sometimes a founder will drop into a meeting and assume that they know everything that's going on because they're the founder and it's their business and they know everything. Well, as a business starts to grow and scale beyond you as an individual, you're not going to know every little thing. And if you need to know every little thing, it's going to take way too much time and energy to manage all that. And that's the first indicator that things need to be addressed. So I think it comes down to decision making and the results from poor decision making, the timeliness of decisions, the frustration factor that are either obvious or sometimes not so obvious. And then I think just the results, right? When what used to work doesn't work anymore. And sometimes it's hard to see or hard to diagnose. They might recognize the problem, but they don't understand what's causing it. And they treat the symptom, not the underlying problem. So the symptom is my people are frustrated and they're angry. The real issue is it's a structural leadership problem. You're not, you have to let go. You have to stop doing and start designing this decision-making process. If an owner or founder needs to really handle everything and touch everything and know everything and control everything, well, they become a speed limit for the organization. So you don't scale the effort, you scale the decisions.
It's funny, as you're talking about this, my grandmother used to say, name the sin, not the sinner. So I will not name the sinner. But I worked with a client once where he was complaining about the team not being so engaged with what he wanted, right? And it turned out the team was the right team. Like they were completely ready, autonomous, but he wanted to be on top of everything. And he was actually, and there was so much chaos and drama on that team. Is that also a telltale sign? Like you're not having a good structure in place. We're not talking about Steve, by the way. Steve's awesome. just to put that, he's not the center here. He's the opposite, actually. He's one of those people like, oh, I kind of got my life back a little bit when we put this in place. But in any case, I'm just curious because sometimes, and then that leader eventually was like, I'm just not ready. I was like, so you don't want to grow. You want to grow, you blame the team, but you're part of the problem and you're not ready. So how do you, at that point, what do you do? Like, how do you help someone who's...
I would say there's structure that comes with it. that becomes part of the solution, is structuring the organization in a way that decisions get made and people are held accountable for what they're responsible for, where they have authority. There's nothing worse than being responsible for something you have no authority over. That's a recipe for frustration. So structure, I think, starts to be part of the solution. And the founder has to go beyond being liked, right? It's hard to be a very effective leader on a scaled organization when you're more worried about being liked by everybody. That's unrealistic, because you're gonna make some decisions and you're gonna force some issues that some people aren't gonna like, because it's gonna affect their job, or it's gonna make their life a little more difficult, or they're gonna have to do something that they didn't expect, but now that's what's needed to grow and scale that business. So the leadership really has to evolve, and the best founders are the ones that can recognize that and find those solutions or bring in resources to create that environment. Structural accountability is what I like to call it. And there's lots of ways to do it, lots of different systems and tools you can use. There's some programs and books and classes and courses. I mean, there's more than one answer here that would fit. Really depends on the person, the culture, the shape and size of what you're dealing with, and what you anticipate this thing becoming. It's pretty rare for the founder to stay with an organization in that leadership role all the way through that growth curve and that scale curve. I've seen it. I've worked, one of my clients has done that, but it's pretty rare. Usually there's a leadership point where the founder just can't do it anymore, and they bring in either another owner or another leadership component to make the change. But it's structured accountability.
You need to be like, make sure you get a strong number two who's not afraid to poke and pat. Poke him in the eye, pat him in the back at the same time.
And there's ways
for another person to do the poking and patting.
Well, and there's ways to organize that so it's done intentionally and not randomly or accidentally.
Let's dive into some of those ways. We like to talk about systems and processes and things like that, and we're talking about a lot of the warning signs and stuff and problems. So what are some of those systems and structures, that you've seen that really help founders in this growth stage, retain maybe that maybe they've had a good culture to begin with and they're starting to see it slip, or they're starting to be stressed by it and not upholding the cultural values that they used to have. What kind of processes or systems have you seen that have really helped in that regard?
I think the fundamental piece is clarity, creating clarity. And I mean, very clear focus, who we are, what we're trying to do, and how we're anticipating growing, having a vision that you can use that's maybe long-term, but medium term and then near term, and bringing it down to like today, this month, this week, this quarter, this year, whatever. So I think clarity is probably fundamental, and clarity really beats comfort. I said when people give up, they have to let go of being liked, but they can't let go of creating clarity. When the founder creates more confusion, does not help the situation. So structurally, I would say internally there's some communication structures, different meetings. Every meeting should have an agenda and a purpose and an expectation of who's there and why they're there. And then also, accountability. Creating accountability is not someone's job. It's everybody's job. It's the environment that we work in. And when there's clarity about who's responsible, what are we doing as a group, and then what is each person's role in that vision to execute that vision, then holding people accountable for their piece. You said this is your piece, and here's your plan, and they break it down into the tactics, and then hold them accountable. And where everybody is holding everybody accountable. It's not just top down or bottom up or even from the sides. It's all the way around. So accountability is what I've learned really helps an organization become a very high performing organization. I lived through this in my family's business. My dad was a founder, wild entrepreneur, just fantastic entrepreneur. But the business got to the point where he really became that bottleneck. And he finally realized it and brought in some outside executive talent. He added a board, which created accountability at a very high level, but structure and budgets and forecasts and reporting and not making knee-jerk reactions, but responding, becoming a little more thoughtful and careful. That accountability and the infrastructure that came with it allowed the organization to really grow much larger and scaled way beyond my dad and his personal ability, as he was always the founder. That doesn't go away. But he had to let go of all the decision making and all the control. And the only way a founder is comfortable doing that is if they have full confidence in their people. So you've got the number one, the right people, and they're in the right spots, the right roles. But then a structure of accountability that doesn't take, it creates, I would say, continuous performance measurement, not just random or incidental. It's not weekly, monthly, quarterly. You don't wait for a quarter to realize, oh, we didn't make the numbers. You know that every day or every week, ongoing and continuous. So I think that there is structural pieces that come into place, but I would say it's even better than that. It's people who understand that kind of structure, whether they're employees or whether they're contractors who can come in and organize and help you set up those systems. Those systems create better clarity, and that clarity is more important than the comfort, because the results that follow will allow you to continue to grow and scale that business.
Yeah, I think we've talked about clarity as kind of a form of kindness, because without that, like you said, you can have all these different problems in there. But once everyone's kind of on the same page with that clarity, then there's no misinterpretations. We're all speaking the same language, right? Mm-hmm. So I know, let's see, I think we've got an audience question here. Let's go to that. All right. It's from a LinkedIn user. What is the very first task a founder should give up that they usually refuse to let go of?
Great question.
I would say hiring. That's usually the last thing they want to give up, but the first thing they should give up. If you're making every hiring decision, then you're really responsible for the results. So I would say, let go of some of the hiring decisions further down the organization. If you're talking about a typical, structure, you have to let people be responsible. So you got to let them make those choices.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're going to be choosing their teammate, right? So that's why you want them in the mix there.
If the founder is a little too involved, I've seen that backfire horribly. Where let's say you've got a department lead in, I don't know, I'm making it up. Let's say it's a training department. Oh, okay, training needs some new staff. Well, the founder's going to hire for the training department. Well, and then that person gets put in there, but they report to someone else who didn't hire them. And for whatever reason, it doesn't work. Well, everyone starts doing this. They all start blaming each other. Well, I didn't hire that person, so I'm not responsible. Yeah, but you lead them. They report to you, so you are responsible. Well, you didn't let me have it then, so I'm not giving it to you now. So I would say that hiring decisions is the ultimate, the first thing to let go. But you're only going to let that go when you've got confidence in the people you have. And then there's delegation skills, which I'm sure you've talked about. It's a universal challenge for people to learn how to delegate carefully and appropriately. Delegation is not just saying, here, do that. That's direction. That's not delegation. So being able to delegate, people can learn how to do these things. But letting go of some of the control, I think that's really where the businesses fail, where the founder doesn't realize that they still have too much control.
So, John, I think everything you've talked about, sometimes it's a lack of self-awareness, and in some cases, when you're a founder, unless you have a coach or a mentor or some kind of a group you go to, who's going to keep you honest is the big question, right? In terms of accountability, sometimes the focus is not going to keep everybody accountable. Who keeps you accountable? Where do you check in your ego? right? So that's a big gap sometimes that happens. So with your experience, especially the mastermind groups, executive leadership teams and leadership circles, why is honest peer-to-peer conversation and outside perspective so valuable for founders and franchisors? Like, in terms of, like, as I said, where do you go and check in your ego? Why do you think that's valuable?
Yeah, well, I think it just keeps people honest. It keeps their feet on the ground. I've seen bad decisions made based on greed and ego, right? And people don't do that consciously. I'll give people the benefit of the doubt, right? I don't think people intentionally have, huge egos or outrageously greedy. But when that's what's driving decisions, that's where the bad decisions start. So having some outside influence or some outside inputs, some perspective that is unattached to the outcome, that's where you get some real honesty and transparency. And generally better decisions get made faster when you've got that outside resource. So whether it's an advisory board, I'm a big fan of advisory boards, or a board of directors, if it's a little more formal and you want that structure, or as simple as a peer group or a mastermind group, which I'm running those now and having a blast. I've been doing that for a long time. I've been a member of a peer group for 25 years. And I can tell you it's helped me grow as an individual and as a professional in so many different ways. So I think it's important you have someone you can really be honest with, and it's not your spouse, it's not your neighbor. I mean, it can be. I'm not saying it's limited to just one person or one group, but I think a good leader has a range of places where they can go to get feedback and input and perspective that they might not have. But having consistency in that feedback environment is what drives performance. So a regular group that meets monthly, a regular board that meets quarterly. You've got advisors and coaches who you can talk to on the fly when something's going on or you need help with whatever it is that blew up today. But people you know and trust who know your business and know your personality and maybe know your team and some of the drama and some of the issues that you've been through. So they've got perspective. They're not just random dropping in for one session, but people who can go with you on this journey over time. And I think also it's, I mentioned it's not always your spouse or your family, that I've seen husband and wife teams that work together. And that can work great. I've seen it work wonderfully. I've seen it fail miserably. I've seen people get divorced because their business just didn't work and they couldn't separate their relationship from the business and things went wrong. So I think it's important to have an outside, qualified, consistent environment for that kind of feedback. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's not one right answer, but I think if you don't have that type of environment to give you that perspective and feedback consistently, you're really taking a big risk for yourself and for your business.
What about purpose? What role does purpose play in shaping that? A lot of cultures that have a purpose beyond making money tend to create an environment where people feel more engaged. They're also more resilient. They tend to have stronger teams. How's the role of purpose in human connection shaped your leadership approach, both in franchising and through Father's Eve? And then we have an audience question after this too, but just curious, like, what role does that play? How does that elevate this whole discussion we're just having?
Well, I think purpose can really help create focus and intention. Like if you know why you're doing something and you're reminded of the why, and creating a way that why is reinforced or reiterated time and time again, so you never lose touch. So purpose, I think, drives a lot of decisions and can really be your guiding light or your North Star. Like, this doesn't change. This is our purpose, our mission, our purpose. And then how does that change? I think as the organization grows and changes, as the people come and go throughout, they may or may not embrace that purpose consistently. And that could be a different problem. That goes back to the hiring decisions, maybe. I always say hire for attitude and values and train for skills. You can train people how to do the work, but if they don't have integrity or the same value system that your organization does, you're going to struggle with those people. So I think having that purpose clarity, but then using that purpose as clarity for hiring decisions and general strategy, is something that needs to happen continuously. It's not a one-time thing or once a year thing. It's an always kind of thing. When I had decades ago, I had a retail store. I was a franchise operator. It was basically a print shop, a business support center. And they did a great job. The brand, I was a franchisee, and the brand did a great job. And they had on the wall was our mission statement, and it was very well done. And I'd bring every new employee. I wouldn't hire. My manager would hire. Right? I didn't care who worked there. I mean, I did, but they didn't work for me. They worked for the manager, the store level. So I'd show up and I'd say, "Oh, you're a new guy." I'd say, "Come with me." And I'd walk them over to the wall and I'd point to that sign. I'd say, "Let's read this together." And we'd read the thing together. And I'd say, "Now listen, if you've got a decision to make and you're not sure what to do, read this, make your decision. I'll back you 100%. Because if you're making your decision based on this vision, this purpose, you'll make the right decision. I'm sure of it." And so reinforcing those values or those missions and purposes creates consistency in the decision-making process. At all levels of the whole organization behaved that way. And it was great. The alignment was powerful.
Yeah, that's so important for founders to understand, is like, if you want to really scale, dialing in that purpose so that whatever decision they have to make, you don't have to be there. They're looking, to run that through. Kind of, does this align with our purpose? And you should always be backing that up if that was if they interpreted the purpose exactly that way. Let's go to, we have an audience question here. Let's grab that. All right. So looking back at the hundreds of brands you've worked with, what is the one common thread among the founders who stayed happy, not just successful?
Oh, great question. Well, I think, success can be defined a lot of different ways, right? It's, economic or monetary or financial. That's, pretty straightforward. But I think about it as the leaders who stayed happy are the ones that see the impact on other people, the positive impact that they're making in franchising. So you hire people as employees for your team, and they're doing a job, and you're paying them, and they're, hopefully the business is growing. Everybody's benefiting from that success in that brand. But when you can see what the franchisees, the impact you're having on their families and their lives, and then their employees and their families and their lives, it's the ripple effect of benefit that a good franchise system can create for the owner, the founder, the leadership team, the management team, the operating team, the franchisees, their employees, even the vendors and suppliers that are in that brand environment. That win, when everybody does what they're supposed to do, everybody wins. And those, I think, that's when I see founders consistently are happy, because they can look back and reflect and say, look at the results for so many people. There was a point in my career early on when my dad passed away. He was our founder, and I was a young guy. I was 26 when my dad died, and I was working my tail off in our family's business. And when my dad died, my motivation went with it, right? Because I was motivated to show him that I could do anything, right? And then when he died, and my mother stepped up, well, I had a different relationship with my mom. So it didn't matter the same way. So it took me some months of therapy and work to recognize, well, what's my motivation? What am I going to do here? Why am I even here? And the ripple effect of, if I do a good job in this role now, Dad's not here anymore, so that factor is sort of gone. If I do a good job, I win, my family benefits, our employees will benefit, their families will benefit, our franchisees will benefit, their families, their employees. It was this ripple effect of influence. And I figured out a rough estimate was 10,000 people would benefit if I got to work and did a good job. It wasn't all about me anymore. It was well, what can I do for the whole organization? And once I got clarity on that motivation, good things came from that. And it was good for me and it was good for everybody. And we went on a tear for the next 5 years, and we doubled the size of that brand and took it to some fantastic results. And that's not all on me. This is not, I didn't do this. I was just one piece of the puzzle, but it was that clarity of impact, the results I could create for other people. And, you talk about, building that into your approach, the scalable success. So I was grateful to have that opportunity, not only to do the work, but to recognize the motivation. And once I had that, man, it was a beautiful thing. And I felt good about it, and I did great work, and we all had a lot of fun. So I think a lot of the other the executive leadership level, we all kind of had that same mindset, is we're not here for ourselves. We're here for each other and everybody who's around us. And man, we do some good. We changed an industry. We had an impact on the whole salon. It was in the hair salon industry and the franchise industry. And the results were fantastic, better than anyone ever expected.
I love it. It's definitely this mindset shift that you have to make if you really want to find, like that question talked about, really that real happiness is kind of understanding how are you really in service to people, and whose lives are you impacting, and what lives are their lives impacting. And so, like you said, it's this ripple effect, which this is why we kind of always ask this question about love in business, because we understand there's this huge ripple effect that this can have. And so to you, John, like, what role do you think should love play in business?
Well, I think it's a personal thing. It's about taking care of people, right? I think if you love the money, so to speak, or what the money creates, that's exciting. I mean, we're human beings. We like to live a good life and have the things and do the things and everything else. But I think it's what you can create for other people that then allows them to create for themselves and for their people. It's a real point of leverage of having that influence. So to me, love in business is creating that opportunity that is transformational. You're changing people's lives, not just their checkbook, but the way they see the world and the way they take care of their own people. And so I think that's really the highest, in my experience anyway, the highest level of love is creating those kind of opportunities for the people who recognize it and are willing to do their role to create that.
Why do you think a lot of companies or businesses don't understand it? Is it just, are they so focused on, transactional stuff every day that they kind of miss the mark?
I go back to greed and ego. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't make me look good or feel good or put dollars into my checkbook, I'm not interested. That's greed. That's ego. And I find that unattractive at every level. And sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes it's not hard to see. I have a way of kind of asking insightful questions before I take an engagement or a project with a new client. I ask a lot of questions. So I kind of try to know what I'm getting involved with. And one of the questions is, what motivates you to do what you're doing? And I'm listening for what they say, and I listen for what they don't say. And then sometimes I'll ask more questions to really make sure I've got a pretty accurate or complete picture. So in my mind, I'm really only interested in helping. I'm more comfortable helping people who I know have that motivation beyond themselves. If they're all about themselves and it's all greed and ego, then I don't stick around. I don't need that. I don't want that. I want nothing to do with that. And honestly, I've seen those brands fail. Either they fail to scale or they grow and they collapse just as fast. And
I used to hear that there was a third reason, which is fear, but I've come to learn that that is also part of ego. Yeah. Because you don't trust anybody else but yourself. You think you're the only one who could do it. So you're afraid of making changes. That's also part of ego. But okay, so unfortunately what happens, sometimes leaders, they get so into the grind their ego gets the best of them, their fear, their greed, and they become overwhelmed. And sometimes they end up being disconnected from their original purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So if we left the audience with one practical tip today, just one thing they should remember, what should that be in terms of helping them reconnect with themselves and their leadership in such a way that can give them, get them a sense of excitement for their business again?
I would say go back to the basics, keep it simple. Businesses grow and it gets complex. A lot of people, a lot of different businesses, a lot of different, we did international. I mean, it gets very complicated very fast. Complexity feels like progress, but it's really not, it's not automatic. So I would say keep it simple and stay focused on what matters. And really, I don't know. I guess I go back to the purpose statement. Know what your purpose is. Why are you doing whatever it is you're doing? What's your biggest purpose? What's your long term? Play the long game. Not just this month, this quarter, this year, whatever. How far out can you think about? What you're doing now? What kind of an impact is it going to have 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now? I've worked with founders who change industries. And that's not just about themselves. That's about people that aren't even born yet are going to benefit from what we're doing today. Because 50 years from now, the industry is going to be in a better place because of what we're doing today. And that's the kind of legacy I think that really motivates me to do the things I do to help the people I can help who are leaving that kind of impact for themselves, for their organizations, and for the people who will follow them.
I like this. We talked about last week playing the bigger game instead of the smaller game. And now we're talking about playing the longer game as well, the bigger, longer game. I love it. Hey, real quick, John, can you tell people about Father's Eve? We haven't really touched on that.
We have to bring it back just to talk about that one, but go ahead.
Well, Father's Eve is I would call it an unofficial holiday that I created as an accident. This is, like most things, it started as an accident in my garage in St. Paul, Minnesota. It turned out I had we moved during that Great Recession, and my lovely wife and my family, we moved to a new house, but the garage was terrible. It was an old house, a terrible garage. So I had the garage torn down and built a real garage. And I'm in Minnesota, so we need place for your cars and your boats and your snowmobiles. And, I wanted all my stuff in one place. And so I had a really nice garage put up. And I wanted to show off my garage to my buddies because we had moved and I wanted to come over and check this out. So we did a garage, basically a christening party for a new garage. And my wife and I, we were, back in those days, had a calendar, a paper calendar. So we'd flip a week at a glance. So we're flipping. And I'm looking for a Friday or Saturday where I could have my buddies over and throw a little garage party. And it was a busy summer with our kids and everything. And so I'm flipping. And I finally found a Saturday in June that was open. She's like, my wife was like, yeah, that'll work. And so I turned the page. Well, the next day was Father's Day. And I said, well, we don't really want to do anything the night before Father's Day. That's not the best. So we kept looking and looking. And there was nothing else till like September. So I said, okay, we're going to do it on that Saturday in June. And if it's the night before Father's Day, we're going to call it Father's Eve, just for fun. So it was kind of started as a joke, to be honest. So I had a bunch of guys over to my new garage, and we had nothing. We threw a bottle of beer against a wall, right? And it was like, break it in. We had too loud music. The music was just too loud. It was perfect. We had no food, no games, nothing. Just a bunch of guys hanging out. I think we had 2 kegs and 3 bags of chips, and that was it. No women, no children, no judgment, no plan, no program, nothing. It was ideal. So I invited all of my buddies over, not all of them, but a bunch of buddies. And what happened is, over the course of the few hours we were together, they all got to know each other. So they came as strangers, but they left as friends. And it was, like I said, there was no real program. It was sort of accidental, but they all said, God, this was fun. Let's do it again. And now it had to be Father's Eve. So the next year we did it intentionally on that Saturday before Father's Day, because it's Father's Eve. I invited a bunch more guys, and it doubled. And then we added some food, we added some games, we got a little smarter. Then the third year, it was out of control. There were people there that I didn't know. And I thought, well, this is great. My friends are bringing their other friends, and everybody, and the same thing would happen. They'd all show up, and by the end of the night, we all kind of knew each other, and we went away, and a lot of friendships and connections were made. So someone challenged me and said, what are you going to do with this Father's Eve thing? And I said, well, what's wrong with it? Look around. What are you talking about? Leave me alone. I'm just having a good time. We're throwing a garage party. And they were like, no, you could do some good with this. Why don't you do something with this? Okay. So I was challenged. So later that year, that fall, I've got some friends of mine that are really good, close friends. I said, look, if we're going to do something more, then I need some help, because I got enough going on. I was running my own stuff. And so we created a small group of guys to help me, and we turned it into a fundraiser for charity. We moved it to a bar that we knew the guy, and he gave us the back room, and we created a silent auction and a live auction. And I called in all my favors, right? Everybody who owed me something, I said, either give me something to sell at the auction or come and buy something. Bring your checkbook and pay too much for this stuff, because we're raising money for charity. Well, we got better than expected results that first year. We kind of organized ourselves. We raised $10,000 for charity. And I'm not an event guy. I'm not a charity guy. I'm not, we're just regular guys. And, but we got good media. We had good organization. We had some friends who knew what they were doing. And collectively, we did this great thing. So that year, someone said, well, why don't you franchise it? Because that's where I live. And the franchise, and I said, well, there's nothing, it's not a business. There's no economic model here. It's one night a year. It's all volunteer stuff, and nobody wants to pay for this. So I went to my lawyer, and he was a great lawyer, still a good lawyer. And he said, look, why don't you trademark it anyway, get the trademark, and then you can license the trademark, but you don't have to charge anything. You can do a conditional license. So we did exactly that. So I went to a conference of dads. It was a dad influencer marketing conference, which I had no business. I'm not an influencer. I don't know anything about it. This was in 2016, so 10 years ago. I showed up with a business card that said Father's Eve and my name and email and phone number or whatever, and I just making friends. And I realized that there was nothing like it out there, right? Everybody's doing their own thing, and I'm trying to do kind of nothing. My goal is that Father's Eve is a function of the calendar. And what happens is guys get together in real life, in local community. You do it in your backyard, you do it in your neighborhood, you do it at your church or your school or your country club or your whatever, wherever your guys want to get together, bars and restaurants. We do it all over the place. And they come together just for fun. There's no real program. We're not buying anything. We're not selling anything. We're not saving anybody. We're not solving anyone's problems. The idea is we get guys to just engage and talk to each other and share ideas. And you learn that, gosh, what I'm dealing with, other guys are dealing with as a father, as a husband, and whatever role or function that you have. And what we learned is that we can help each other just by showing up and asking questions and sharing. If you want to share something, go ahead. What I learned is the old guys learn from the young guys, and the young guys learn from the old guys. So like let's say when my kid was going to college, I'd say, who's got kids in college, man? What did you learn when you sent your kid off to college? What did you learn that you didn't know that I could learn? So I know. So those guys are telling me all about picking the dorm rooms or roommates or whatever it might have been. And then I was a young guy. I'd say, hey man, how old are your kids? And he's like, oh, they're whatever. I said, have they learned to ride a bike? Yeah, let me tell you how I taught my daughter how to ride a bike. Whether I did it right or wrong, is this what worked for me, right? So, and then now it's the young guys teaching the old guys about technology. Like, well, what is this TikTok thing, or whatever it might be, So we learn and share all kinds of stuff because there's no format. It's just kind of open conversation. So we do these in real life groups. Everyone's volunteer. No one's paying for anything. I say it's all fun. It's free. It's everywhere. And the moment of engagement is we do a toast at 8:00. So everybody knows on New Year's Eve, you got to wait till midnight and count down to 10, 9, 8, we'll watch the ball drop in Times Square or whatever. On Father's Eve, we back that up to 8:00 because I don't want to see midnight. I want to be in bed by 10:30, So at 8 o'clock, you stop everything, you grab a beverage, and we count it down, 10, 9, 8, and it's a toast, to the dads, happy Father's Day. So we're celebrating fatherhood. I say we connect, share, and celebrate fatherhood. And what I've learned from all of this is if guys can show up and just be a little more intentional, just a tiny bit more intentional of being a better husband, a better father, a better whatever, it helps them, it helps their family, it helps their community, it helps in so many levels. And again, guys realize that they're not alone. I think a lot of guys, as we get older, they lose their ability to make friends. I'm lucky. I've got friends from school, friends from work, friends, we go hunting and fishing and snowmobiling, and we do all these different things. Yeah. I bring them all together for Father's Eve. And it happens all over the country. Now, we did it in our peak. We were in 60 cities, and we had thousands of guys. Then COVID, like everything, kind of knocked it all down, and it pushed us online. So now we do it online. We do the toast in every time zone and across the U.S. I feel like Dick Clark in the old days when they just recycle that hour.
You got the Father's Eve.
But we do Father's Eve, and we have a lot of fun with it. It's a lot of fun, and we've made an impact on a lot of guys. We continue to raise money. Not everybody does a fundraiser, but we have, and we've raised about $50,000 for different charities. We're not a charity. We're not a 50C anything. We're just I guess an event organizer, and just having fun with it. The whole idea is to bring guys together for good, and see what happens when they do get together and share some ideas.
So guys, you need to start planning now. We just finished Mother's Day, so now you can focus on this. Where can people go to learn more about Father's Eve?
Well, Father's Eve is just that, and we're on all the socials. We got a website and everything else. Not hard to find. We're standing up our systems right now because, like I said, most guys don't think about this till after Mother's Day, and they're like, well, when is Father's Day? I mean, that's my point. It's Father's Day is sort of a brush off holiday. So we don't want to take anything from Father's Day. I say Father's Day is for dads and family. I love being a dad. I love being with my family. But if I want to be with my buddies, I'm going to do that the night before because they're all relatively free and available. And again, it doesn't interfere with my Father's Day if I've got Father's Eve. So now everybody has Father's Eve. So we created this kind of as an accident, but really now more on purpose. And we are having a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. John, thank you for joining us on the show today. Our 200th guest. Appreciate all your perspectives and leadership and everything. To our listeners, thank you to, growth is not just about scaling a business. It's also about evolving as leaders and, building relationships and staying connected to purpose, as we talked about through those ups and downs. So thank you for being with us on this journey. And as we celebrate our 200th guest episode of the Bliss Business Podcast, we are reminded that most meaningful growth happens through real conversations. So go out there and find some guys on Father's Eve to have some of those conversations if you can. And we need a Mother's Eve as well, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. We will see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.